All right. Let me know when. Good? Okay. Okay. I'd like to call this meeting to order. The mission of the Freehold Township School District is to honor and support every learner every day on the journey to become curious and engaged members of a diverse global community. A notice listing the time, date, and place of this meeting was posted on the public bulletin board of all Freehold Township schools, on the entrance door to the administrative offices of the Board of Education, on the district website, at the office of the Freehold Township Clerk, published in the Asbury Park Press on January 6th, 2023, and sent to the news transcripts on January 4th, 2023. I'd like to invite you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call.
Mrs. Brand, Mrs. Cosolino,
Here.
Mr. Gargiulo,
Here.
Mrs. O'Sullivan,
Present.
Mrs. Thoman,
Here.
Mrs. Vendatoli,
Here.
Mr. Williams,
Here.
Mr. Amoroso,
Here.
Mrs. Lambert.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. I'd like a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes from September 12th, 2023.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay. I will save my president's remarks until after we get through the administrative report. So I think we'll start on the administrative report, Bob, with board member certification and then facilities.
All right, so I, Robert DeVita, the school business administrator / board secretary, certifies that as of August 31st, 2023, no line item has been overexpended in violation of NJAC 6A:23A-16.10 C3, and that sufficient funds are available to meet the district's financial obligations for the remainder of the fiscal year. The next item here is the budget calendar, and for those of you who've been on the board for a while, this is an annual item that we put on here. Usually in October. This year I've decided to start the budget process a little bit early. If you look at the calendar, it's almost identical to last year, where we start the process now working with the admin team. We start gathering information. We start having our first conversations in January and February as a board. Barring any change in the election calendar, which I don't think there will be, we'll have to adopt a tentative budget in March, and then we will have a final budget hearing in April. So this is a CUSAC item, and that's why I'm in a CUSAC frame of mind, so I decided to get on here for a month early. Anyone have any questions about the calendar itself? Okay. Next thing, facility update. So you probably recall, probably about 6 months ago now, we had a conversation about a potential need for a referendum. So I just want to talk, we're almost at that point to have that conversation, and I want to go through with you guys just some things for the next 5 to 7 minutes on facilities. So quick history for the district. The last time we had a referendum was in '99 and then again in 2000 or 2001. And the primary purpose of those referendums was for building new things, new gyms, new cafeterias, the new West Freehold School. Every school got an addition. We got new roofs at that point in time, which now are all out of warranty. And with the exception of the two that we just put on at West Freehold and over at Donovan, all leak. All that new stuff that we purchased way back when has now become old. So before we talk about kind of our needs going forward, I did want to give you guys can each take these. It's kind of a listing of what we've done. And I do want to thank this board and all the previous boards. I mean, I've been here 8 years now, and we have gotten a lot of work done. So it's not like we've been sitting around doing nothing to maintain our facilities for the last 8 to 10 years. And I know prior to my arrival, the board had redone the parking lot in between here and over at Barcelo. Mr. Amoroso, the cupola, which has been dedicated to you, it was redone. And there's some things done, but if you look at the document I just handed out, we have spent $23.5 million on projects. So that's the good news. The bad news is I have a list of at least $42 million more that needs to get done. So, I'm not going to go through this whole list. I mean, a big piece of this was the ESIP that we did, which impacted all the schools. Some of the things that you see in bold there, those were things that were emergencies. I remember my second winter here, pulling up into the parking lot over winter break, and the entire facility team was outside as the pipes burst to run the boiler to here. The gym floor over Katina. When I came back, the floor had already started bubbling up. Remember, at West Freehold School, we had to replace all that. HVAC has failed, so we've done a lot, but there's still a lot to go. And just to give you guys an update, we haven't gotten the official notification from the DOE. I know it's been announced in the paper. We're receiving a $1.4 million ROD grant, and that'll be applied to 2 future projects for HVAC replacement over at Erickson and Applegate. That will account for 40% of that projected bid cost, which is about $3.5 million. We also submitted for a ROD grant, but it did not receive approval for it because it was a level 2 priority and they were only able to fund level 1. For those who've been here for a while, does everyone remember the switchgear box in the back of Eisenhower?
Oh, that's that thing
Yes,
that
I
went.
do.
Correct.
That
And
we didn't have school for a couple of days.
3 days.
Yeah.
So we did not have school
Okay.
for 3 days. So
That's
that's
not a priority.
it is. Well, so the way they did it was HVAC, roofing, and I think windows were like the big 3 winners. Electrical system upgrades fell to a priority 2. So they had 1,000 applications from the 600 school districts to be reviewed. And listen, we got 40% of one of our projects paid for. I'm more than happy. I never expected to get that much money. We will also bid that switchgear, and all the other electrical panels in that building will be upgraded. I see a confused look on your face.
I thought that when we fixed that, we did it. We didn't do it.
We replaced the part that broke.
Oh, okay.
So here's the good news. We will have 8 more years of that part. Once we bid this, it's a 5 to 8 year lead time to get these things. And
Okay.
here's what's going on, and I've seen the article in the Wall Street Journal. There is a year-long wait list for transformers on the electric poles. The same components that go into all this gear also goes into electric vehicles. And so there's not enough supply of materials to meet the demand of everything that they're trying to do. There are developments across the country that are being delayed because they can't get transformers into that, especially the bigger ones. So I talked to the architect about this. It's not, right now not a big deal because when we did the ESIP, we replaced the transformers and we replaced all the electric-based HVAC. So the load on that switchgear has been reduced, and we've been okay. And so we'll do the bid. We'll replace all the panels inside the building, and then it could be 3, 4, 5 years before we get a new switchgear box. But they looked at refurbished ones, and they just can't make that recommendation. They said there's still a 12-month lead time for that. So, but we're doing a lot of stuff. But as I said, there's still about $42 million worth of projects to go. I am projecting, if I take off what we currently have in cap reserve, the about $1 million we're going to put away through this audit process we have now, and I subtract what we have to take out for those 2 projects I just mentioned, we'll have about $2.75 million left over for either other future projects to fund pre-referendum costs, to have the architect actually start to work on this to get this for 12 or 18 months out to a potential vote, or any other emergencies that pop up, or that money can be applied to the debt service. As I said, we have 8 more years of the debt service left. I think in 3 years we start to get a spike because there's one bond referendum that's left. So we've done a lot. We don't have much money left in the kitty, and there's a lot of things that are breaking. For those of you that saw the email that I sent out last night about the Univents, we had one break the other day. They don't make parts for it anymore. We're talking 50 to 60 grand to replace that. We have hundreds of these units district-wide that need to be replaced. So
How is that the best solution, the replacement? Is there anything else they can do other than those unit? Like, is there any kind of upgrade or?
not that I'm aware of. Usually, we did actually during the referendum in 2002. The original footprint of Donovan had all of its UVs replaced, but that's the last time we've touched it. We've done one or two here or there. The one in my office serves as a plant holder. We took the motor out of it a couple of years ago. We put it somewhere else because there's an electric heater up there in my ceiling for a pipe. But I'll just read you off some of the things that are on the list, and it's consistent throughout the buildings. Roofing is a big one. The controls that control our HVAC, I've mentioned a number of times, the parts are obsolete. Johnson Controls will refurbish our controls, but once they go, the units basically run at their set point. You can't adjust them. You can't do anything with it. Windows in a couple of places. The UVs are big over at Eisenhower. About $4.6 million worth of roofing, $2.4 million worth of univents. So there's a lot to do. Things that are also, we have security vestibules that are priced out here for each of the buildings to create those man traps we've talked about for a long time. That's on our long range list. Things that aren't on the long range facility plan that we would like to consider adding, and this is part of gathering information from all our stakeholders for security. Bollards in front of all the schools. For those who don't know what a bollard is, you know, when you drive in front of a Wawa or 7-Eleven, they're the steel pipes that stick out of the ground or concrete, so you can't ride your car through the front of the building.
Yep.
The boilers in the K-pods are now over 20 years old. They need to be replaced. Both middle schools, the lockers are almost as old as I am, and probably we've refurbished them a number of times. They probably need to be replaced. Solar, which was part of our strategic plan, now would be the time to have that discussion. We just did 2 roofs, and those are right now the only 2 viable roofs in the district for solar. I know we've talked about possibly considering a PPA, power purchasing agreement. Now would be the time to, depending on where numbers work out, to see if that's viable or if buying solar outright makes any sense. So there's a lot in here. We're also going to have the architect come and walk all of our STEAM centers. And I mean, we've done a pretty good job, I think, of kind of snazzing up ourselves, but to have them come take a look at those spaces, if they have any recommendations for us. So we're in the process right now, if this board really wants to support this and start to investigate what we possibly would do, what it would cost. I would go to the architect tomorrow, say, come up with your proposal for the pre-referendum cost. That money, that cost would be supported by the capital reserve funds that we have here. And then it's about a 12-month process at least to work with the architect, your stakeholders, and our financial professionals to start to develop a plan before you can even go out to vote and start to market it. My goal would also, because I know we had this conversation a few months ago, if we do go down this route, we would budget for next year to hire a PR person to work with us prior to any kind of vote for a referendum. So I will send everyone out this list of projects. It's a lot, but almost every school looks the same. But we're at the point now to where we've done a lot. I don't know, based upon our budgetary needs, I can't anticipate having $4 or $5 million like we did during the COVID years to put back in the capital reserve to take care of a large chunk of these projects. So, did I stay within my time limit, or did I go over?
Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
Does anybody have any questions? I know we had spoken about, I wanted to gather information first. I didn't want to say, oh, we need to do a referendum and not tell everybody why. Mr. Williams.
Forgive me if this has been discussed in the past,
Yep.
obviously. With regards to the solar, instead of putting them on the roof, do we have the ability to do like the fields, like I've seen schools that have the fields or parking, like over the
Parking.
Long branch.
deck, yeah, something like.
You could do
I don't know
parking.
the exact wording.
You could do parking canopies. I'm not sure about the solar fields. The only place that really has space to do a solar field would be West Freehold, and you'd still have to get it past the neighbors.
I
So
was told that if it's not directly connected to a load,
You
you
can't-
cannot use a field.
correct. So the one at West Freehold, you could directly connect to a meter. You can't if you're thinking of that extra piece of property. We've had that conversation before on Dutch Lane. It has to be directly tied to a facility.
And I believe when we did this parking lot, we put the trenching in for the canopy so that we could run the power leads without digging up the whole parking lot. Yeah, if they did it, but it was requested.
I mean, obviously, it could be a more, I don't know,
Yeah,
I don't know, cost effective is the right word.
So the DOE, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, I apologize. The DOE treats roof mounted versus ground mounted units differently in terms of what they're willing to pay for. Because remember, if you do a referendum, the state is on the hook for their version of 40% of their cost. Now, they're still at, I think, $127 a square foot, which is ridiculous for building. But we're not doing new construction. We're doing renovation work, which has a higher value with them. So the only issue with the solar is market conditions. It's all market driven if you could do a power purchase agreement, because you need someone to finance that for you outside of the referendum. But it's, as I said before, because it's on the strategic plan, that was kind of I haven't done much work on it knowing we're going to have this conversation, that it's probably best to intertwine it with a referendum.
Our Marburg has a mix. They
Yep.
have field, they have
Yep.
parking lot, and I think they may have roofs too. I'm not positive about
Yep.
that.
So I know my son was at my old stopping ground in Robbinsville, and he said, "Oh, Dad, I didn't know they put up in the parking lot with the high school drivers the canopies."
Yeah,
And I
they
said,
do.
So anybody have any questions? Is anybody opposed for me to get the proposal from the architect? It may be in October when I can present it. It may be in November. Okay, and I will send you guys out this list. I'll email it to you. It's like I said, it's pretty consistent amongst the schools. There's nothing that's really a surprise. It's stuff we've known. It's just
It
old.
would be helpful to know it all before budget times, right? So we know what we're up against,
In terms of
like everything that needs to be on a referendum versus what we can possibly budget for, or is that off the table?
no, what would happen is let's say by the time we go through all this, whatever falls off this list, because there two schools need their parking lots redone. If based upon whatever number we back into for what we feel that if we go to referendum, the taxpayers would potentially support. Whatever falls off, I'll have to find other ways to finance that. It could be at that point in time the kitty for capital reserve gets bigger, and then we could do the projects one at a time. Maybe rod grants become available. Listen, every time I've gone through this exercise, there's always a wish list of items, and I can things will fall off because you can't see that number what it's going to be from a taxpayer standpoint, and it's hard to justify. But then we find other ways to do it, whether it's you could do a 5-year lease, capital lease, different rules for that, but you just have to make sure you have budgetary dollars available for the next 5 years to pay off that project. There's other ways. So but we need to at least start gathering information. Back into financial professionals will be the key people to actually say, all right, this is what our projections are, and then we start having conversations with the board and stakeholders of, all right, what do we think we can support? And then you have to build your question, and that's when all the PR starts.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And if anyone comes up with any questions, after, just email me, call me. More than happy to answer.
Okay. Diane, for the administrative report?
There we go. So just thank you, everyone, for your participation at our back to school nights. We have a few more to go. Erickson, Barkalow this week, ECLC. But we've had an excellent turnout by the board. So thank you. Thank you to all of our staff for all you're doing to welcome our kiddos. It's hard to believe we're 13 days into the mission. It kind of feels like about 100. And, but it's great, and our buildings are bustling with activity. I only have one short thing to say, and then I'm going to hold, Mr. Dickstein has shared some comments, but I'm going to hold them until later in our meeting. So we found out from the New Jersey Teacher Leader Policy Fellowship Program that of all the applications that were accepted in the state, we had one staff member chosen to be one of the 10 to participate in this advocacy program. And these teachers will work to learn about and engage in education policy and advocacy in the state of New Jersey. So a big congratulations to Randy Gecki at our Early Childhood Learning Center. And she represents us well, and it's a great reflection on our district to have someone. Yay. So that's all I have, and then I'll turn it over to Michelle for now, and I'll hold this till
Okay.
later.
I wanted to echo what Diane said. Thank everybody for attending the back to school nights. And we have 2 more this week. I think Erickson tomorrow, Barcelo Thursday, and ECLC on the 4th, I believe. So those of you that can make it, please do so. Also, if you check your email for each individual school's updates. In those updates are the individual school PTO fundraisers and events going on. If there's opportunity for you to participate in any way, for example, Applegate School was running a labels fundraiser. All you do is click on the labels, and if you need labels for your home and you were going to buy them anyway, you may as well buy them through there and have it benefit one of our buildings. So just a reminder to check all the emails that come in with the updates from the schools, because the links would be there for their various fundraisers. So in terms of school happenings, I know Katina School was supposed to have a walkathon for pediatric cancer run by Live Like a Unicorn. It was supposed to happen Friday. The 22nd. So I don't know if that actually occurred. If there's anybody here from Katina who can speak to it. Yep.
Said he participated.
He did.
That's a good
He was
sign.
there. So that was a good time.
Okay.
Okay, so
When did the rain start?
the rain really started late
Late on
Friday,
Friday.
so, but you never know. Okay, so
Very into it.
he was there. Yeah, no, I think it was a great format. They went out in grade levels, or they were, supposed to have gone out in grade levels. September 29th is Katina's family movie night, and they have a family STEAM center night on October 18th. So keep that on your calendar if you want to take a ride over there and see what that's all about. Applegate, like I said, has their Scholastic Book Fair Family Night October 6th, and I guess then they'll kick off their Scholastic Book Fair. And Erickson is kicking off their Scholastic Book Fair on September 29th. Not leaving out any other buildings. I just don't have information yet from those buildings on what else they have going on. But this is my friendly reminder to board members and parents alike to check the school happenings correspondence that come home, because you'll have links to all the fundraisers and events there.
Can I add something for Erickson and Kathy?
Can you put your,
Sure.
that's okay. The top part there.
Thank you.
There you go.
Sorry, it's been a while. Erickson is also doing the mural again.
Mhm.
So for their legacy murals, a couple years ago they had a painter come in and do the one half of the building,
Yes.
but Mike didn't get a book. So now they're bringing her back to do the other half of the building. So that is another. I know you did. So those legacy books for the families, and it's for current families, it's for past families, future families even. I bought one for my kids.
Right.
So they're doing that, and they're having parents come in and help paint the mural along with the artist.
Yeah.
So that's
Okay.
coming up too. I think starting this week.
Okay.
Paint cans were out.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep. And then also to preface, we have a late addition to our agenda under policy to discuss policy 5756. So I wanted to give some background why this is on our agenda and how we're going to proceed with it. The policy was put into effect 2019 in this district. As we were told, it was a mandated policy, as most school boards were told. For various reasons, many citizens, school boards have taken issue with the policy, regardless of what your reasoning might be. And there are people who are part of political agendas, political organizations who are pushing abolition of the policy for one reason or another. That doesn't belong on this school board. But what is right by students and how we feel we operate within the laws is what belongs on this school board. So, as you are aware, several school districts ended up in litigation with the Attorney General when they attempted to amend the policy. And in part of in the course of some of those litigations, the Attorney General has come forth and said the policy actually was never mandated and went so far as to say that the state would never ban a district from giving parental consent. The problem with the policy as written is it is ambiguous and it creates confusion under the law as well as many other policies that we already have in existence and laws that we have in existence. So typically, a district like Freehold Township, we are committee by policy. We are board by committee. So we have various committees where change would effectuate first. And they would get discussed in committee and then discussed with the full board. When you're talking about the possible abolition of a policy where you have 9 board members who feels very strongly for very different reasons, I thought it was best and conferred with Mr. Amoroso, who's our board vice president, as well as our board attorney, that we discuss this as a full board with each other. The way our district operates, any policy goes through 2 readings. So possible abolition of the policy would go through 1 reading, we would call it. It gets voted on. And the second reading is when the final action would actually be taken. So based on discussions that we will have later in this meeting under policy, whether we put this on our agenda this evening as a first reading will be determined at that time. If it does, over the course of the next month, and I guess at the next board meeting, all our community stakeholders would have a chance to weigh in via email and obviously at the next meeting, where it would go on for a second reading. Each board member here is entitled to speak on behalf of the students in this district and the parents and their constituents as to how they feel about abolition of the policy. And or, some board members mentioned revision. They can bring that up. You might witness arguing amongst one another. I would just urge you to let the board do its job because we are not allowed to convene unless we're in public. So this is our first opportunity as an entire board to discuss this. So I ask for your grace and your patience when we do so. So with that, I will move on to public participation. If anyone would like to address the board on an item being voted on the agenda this evening, please feel free to step to the podium, state your name for the record, write your name and address for the record. If you have something you'd like to address that is not being voted on this evening, we have a second opportunity for public participation later in the agenda. So would anybody like to address?
Just a quick question for you about the process.
Uh-huh.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So you said maybe we're voting tonight, maybe we're not. Should people speak now, or should they hold their,
They could speak now, they could speak later. It would,
I just
yeah,
wasn't sure
it
if
wouldn't
we
be
were
fine,
taking-
it wouldn't be a final vote. Any vote tonight would be a resolution to put it on as a first reading. And then the final vote, because our policy, practice, and bylaws require 2 meetings, that's why we always have a first and second reading in policy, would require the final vote in the next meeting,
The October meeting.
the October meeting. The date escapes me at the moment, but
Yes. Yep.
17th. So it's really because it is a possibility if someone wants to get up and speak now, I have no problem with it. So if anybody would like to address the board, please step forward. I will tell you that I'm going to reiterate this because there's been some confusion in our board meetings. Our statements are limited to 3 minutes in length, and the opportunity for public participation is an opportunity for public comment, but not necessarily an opportunity for question and answer with the board. We hear everything that you say. Sometimes we don't engage in an answer because it's not the right thing to do. Understand that when I speak in this seat, I don't speak as an individual. I speak on behalf of the board. So if something warrants further discussion and a thought process with the other board members. I have not had the opportunity to do that, so I would refrain from commenting back. But it's not that I don't hear you, or we don't hear you.
So on the subject that you were just.
And please sign in. I don't know if you sign, put your
Did
name
you?
and
Yeah, your
address
name
them.
and then state your name for the record.
Mrs. Lambert,
Yes.
could I request that
I'm
everyone
sorry.
mention whether or not they're residents of Freehold Township?
I'm
Yes.
Freehold Township. Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
So on the subject you were just.
Your name,
talking
please.
about, you want me to speak on it now, not wait until you all discuss it?
It's really up to you. Can you state your name for Mr. DeVito?
Yes, I'm sorry. Jeanette Mistretter, I'm from Freehold Township.
Thank you.
I've lived here in Freehold Township since 1999. As you can see, I'm a senior now, paying taxes for all of the school children to go to school here on the public school, which I think is great. I consider that cycle of life. When I lived in Marlboro, somebody paid for my children to go to school. I'm a little concerned about, and I'm sure you've heard it because you mentioned it, the school board issue has become very politicalized. And there are certain groups, like for instance, the Moms for Liberty, seems a very innocent group, but it's not. Okay, people are running for school board and are on school boards to come and undermine our whole entire public school system. I'm not sure, because I don't know most of you, how I feel about everybody on this board, or how I feel about some of the new people running for this board, that if the agenda is right for this community. I think some people have their own agenda, and that's why they're running for school board. I just want you to know that I'm seeing you, watching you, and I'm sure the other parents in Freehold Township are doing the same. We have a reputation for having an excellent school system, and I don't want to see groups coming in here undermining this with this woke nonsense and destroying our entire school system. I believe your job, and our job as parents, is to do no harm, and that means not to torment, in particular, the LGBT community. I think that's a minority, not a majority of people. So if the agenda is extremism, then I say, please don't go there, because you're going to destroy our community and our families. Public schools, we don't want banning of books. We don't want to make life harder for the teachers, the librarians. We just don't want our education system to be politicized. We need to be teaching reading, writing, arithmetic, the well-being of all our students, no matter who they are, and not letting a certain group of parents and organizations, which are very organized, pay for the money, coming into our systems and making a mockery out of our school system. Safe school, safe lives. This is our observation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
Make it easier for you.
Hello.
Hi. Let's just let Bob start the clock.
Yep.
Okay. Go ahead.
My name is Leslie Hune. I'm actually a new resident of Monmouth County. I've only been here for about a year. First of all, I want to thank all of you for your service for the Board of Ed. I know it's not easy. I know it's a volunteer job. I'm a school nurse. I've been a school nurse for 13 years.
Can we get an address, please?
Oh, it's 53 Duncan Way in Freehold Borough.
Thank you.
Anyway, I've been a school nurse for 13 years. I've I've been in Monmouth County working in Monmouth for a year. I worked in Northwest New Jersey in a very rural school district. And I've worked in a big urban district in Passaic County, and now I work in Monmouth County. And I feel like I have a kind of a unique perspective, and I just thought I'd share it with you. Just, maybe you just reflect about and think about it as you're going for this very difficult process. And I know there's a lot of contention, and I just wanted to share my thoughts and just hope you'd listen. As a school nurse, my primary role always is student safety, right? That's like the main thing that I do. That's my main focus, is to make sure the students are safe. I've had the experience of giving a child an EpiPen when they've been in anaphylactic shock. I've had the experience of children with concussions. I've had the experience with children in severe respiratory distress. And my primary concern is always the safety of the child. That is the first thing that I'm doing, is I'm administering medical to that child. Before I'm calling a parent, before I'm doing anything else, I have to make sure that that child is safe. That is my primary goal. And most of us who work in the public schools, or those of us who are educators, that's always the main thing we're thinking about is safety. Another experience I've had as a school nurse is I've seen a child who's been whipped with a belt to the point that they have whip marks on their back. And Child Protective Services has to be called because somebody has to protect that child. And sadly, and I know a lot of people, it's an uncomfortable thing that people don't want to hear, but sometimes children have to be protected from their parents. And this is something that I've experienced in all of the 3 places where I've been a school nurse. And I can tell you that I've experienced that more frequently than I've experienced any issues with LGBT parents or LGBT kids or transgender issues between a child and the family. So that is something that doesn't happen very frequently. And not that calling Child Protective Service happens frequently, but it's something that I have seen every place that I've worked. And sometimes the staff and the people that work in the schools, we are the protectors of those children. We are the ones that stand between them being sometimes hurt by their parents.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to wrap it up. Your 3 minutes is up.
So what I'm just asking is that you consider that, because I certainly can't imagine being in the situation as someone who's worked with children for 13 years and loves every day of it, being forced to call a parent when I feel like it's unsafe for a child. I certainly cannot imagine having to do that. That would make my job almost feel impossible. And I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. It's 3:26.
The sign-in sheet?
Okay. Yeah, the
There's no
sign-in
right
sign-in
there.
sheet?
Did somebody take the
took it.
sign-in sheet? And one of the 2 people who spoke, check your pile of papers?
The first woman had paper. Here.
Oh, no, there it
she
is. So, thank you. Sorry about that. I'll tape it down next time.
George Falcone, East Freehold Road. Hello.
Hi.
This policy that we're speaking of tonight is being abolished around the state for obvious reasons. On its face, it's absolutely absurd that you would cut off communication between a parent and a parent's offspring, not our child, our offspring, about situations as serious as this. You call us for a headache. I mean, it's ridiculous that we're even having this conversation. It's being abolished around the state because, number one, it was never mandatory. You guys have been duped into it. It was never mandatory. And you've been following this policy since 2019. It's ridiculous that you didn't know it wasn't a mandate. Stop. As usual, they lie. They lie to you and they lie to us. And tonight it needs to end. Tonight. I would remind this board that Robert's Rules of Order come before any policy of this board. The Constitution comes before any policy of this board. Policies are nothing. It's a piece of paper. A motion needs to be made tonight to abolish this policy tonight and voted on tonight. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cough drop.
My name is Wendy Sabin. I live in Freehold Township on Loganberry Lane. I have a short statement to read. I speak as a former school counselor of elementary age students. By repealing the current board policy without replacement, you are nullifying the intent of the existing policy, which was, quote, to ensure that the schools provide a safe and supportive learning environment that is free from discrimination and harassment for transgender students, and that gender-based policies, rules, and practices can have the effect of marginalizing, stigmatizing, and excluding students. That's your current wording. As we all know, childhood and adolescence are times of exploration and experimentation. Suppression will not stop our children from discovering their true identity. Instead, it can increase the likelihood of mental health problems like depression, anxiety, and tragically, suicide. As a professional and as a parent, I implore you to protect our children, respect their autonomy, independence, and privacy by leaving the current policy in place. If you don't, you could potentially create a life-threatening situation for a child who is not in an affirming and supportive home environment, and where school is the one and only safe and validating place. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Deb Smith, and I'm a Freehold Township resident, a 38-year taxpayer, and retired hospital social worker, having served this community for 35 years. It was my greatest joy to support patients and their families through life-changing and life-limiting illnesses. I care deeply what happens in this community. The policy 5756 was instituted by a Republican governor, Christie, with both Dems and Republicans coming together. The policy was created to ensure that public schools would ensure the safety of LGBTQ youth. 45% of LGBTQ youth have considered suicide this year, including half of the transgender youth due to not feeling accepted. In simple terms, New Jersey was just trying to lower the risk of student suicide. An admirable goal, right? That doesn't sound like grooming to me. As these parents' rights groups, Moms for Liberty, Team Protect Your Youth, NJ Project would assert. Those are the names that I've been called. These are the groups that seek to divide, clearly stoking the flames of dissension. So why now? Why after 5 years are people so angry? Have any of these parents called the school to ask if their own children have changed their pronouns? I understand from Mr. Dickstein that fewer than 5 children since its inception have been impacted here, and that all 5 of them, all 5, have been counseled and their parents were informed with guidance. So I'll ask again, why now? 5756 requires that district personnel should have an open but confidential discussion to provide counsel to the child, informing them of the risk that parent might find out anyway, and working with the child to tell the parents unless they don't feel safe. And we heard what that can turn into. These parents' rights groups even want to out those children. Regardless of all the counseling experts that have demonstrated the extraordinary harm that it'll cause. Shouldn't parents know about their kids' gender identity? Of course. Wouldn't it be great if every one of these kids came from a safe home environment but sadly, the statistics prove otherwise. Transgender students from across the state and their families have been pleading with school boards not to do away with this policy. Why don't their voices matter most? When my daughter was a student at Laura Donovan, we had a wonderful program there called Character Counts, which supported an anti-bullying program. I would strongly encourage this board to stand up to the bullies and model for your students the kind of character worth emulating. Please do not rescind this policy.
Thank you.
Hello?
Hello.
My name is Matt Jenkins. I live at 4 Westminster Drive in Colts Neck. There are two sides to this argument. You have the people that's going to affect and the people that it's not going to affect. From the first group, we've heard from the trans community, the children and adults, and we've heard from the LGBTQ community, children and adults. We have heard from advocates, we have heard from teachers, and some of the advocates who are on the front line of trauma. And they all say the same thing. Please do not change this policy. And on the other side, you have the 99.9% of the student body who are not going to be affected by this. They want it changed. This is going to affect, what does someone say, 5 people? There's like 1 kid maybe. Yet we spend an enormous amount of time discussing this. This is to protect that 1 kid, like the nurse who spoke a minute ago, who she knows it's going to put in danger if she calls the parents. That's all this policy is for. That 1 kid in your entire district. Why are we spending so much time fighting this? Please, do not change this policy. Protect that 1 child who needs it. Thank you.
Sign in quick. Hello, everyone. My name is Johnny Candell. I live at 72 Rustic Way, Freehold, New Jersey. Have for my whole life. Yeah, I wrote a little speech, so I'd like to just read it now. My name is Johnny Candell, and I'm a former student of Freehold Public Schools. I was at Applegate Elementary, Eisenhower Middle School, and I was even homecoming king of Freehold Township High School. So I've experienced this school system firsthand, the good and the bad parts of it. And I'm really disappointed that this council may join other school boards by stripping rights away from trans youth. As a gay man, figuring out my sexual identity was really overwhelming to handle in middle school and high school. I was constantly nervous about saying too girly things or singing too hard to the new Lady Gaga song. I became hyper aware of my actions and I let my fear define how I acted, and there was no way to live. But I made friends in high school and college who understood what I was going through, and talking with my peers in a safe space gave me the confidence I needed. It's comforting to know I could have come out to a teacher I trusted when I was ready. But if you repeal this policy, that would make it impossible. I came out to my parents when I was 20 at Moore's Tavern down the street, and they were really understanding and chill, and I'm so grateful for that. I like to think if I was in school now where the kids are more accepting, I could have started this big part of my life even sooner. Telling my parents was the biggest hurdle because I feared it would flip my life upside down, and if they didn't accept me for who I am, it could have ruined everything. I hate to think of the young trans kid who doesn't feel comfortable or safe coming out at home, knowing there might be repercussions just solely for being yourself. Coming out is a deeply personal decision that you're stripping away from a person. Forcing a report of pronoun or name change to go to the parents who may not be ready to accept their trans child can lead to catastrophic hate. If your child is struggling with their gender or sexual identity and they aren't telling you about it, then it is not your business. Adding this forced outing and bureaucracy and parental pressure can stop people from understanding new parts of themselves. This is protecting no one. In 2023, I see a world where you can come out and be accepted. Repealing this law, this policy that protects trans youth is a setback to the years of hard-fought progress. I'd also just like to end with a quote from queer artist Rebecca Sugar. I don't need you to respect me, I respect me. I don't need you to love me, I love me. But I want you to know you could know me if you change your mind. So I hope you change your mind. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to address the board?
Carmela Steele, Freehold Township. So I want to say that every child deserves to be treated fairly and the same respect, no matter who they are and what they are. And I had a child in this system who was bullied in school, and it went all the way up from middle school all the way to high school. And in the end, Township did whatever they could to, I think they admitted that it was a bullying situation. But in the end, my daughter, I needed to be there for her, and I was made aware of how she was bullied. It was something that I carry with her now. In the past, I carried her through it. Parents are there in the beginning, and parents are there in the end. Where will the school district be when children are out of school? These are elementary school children. I don't think we need to add to influencing them one way or the other. People decide what they are. And I think that every parent deserves the right to be 100% involved in all of their child's care. Like, it is not okay to say that we're going to keep secrets from mom or dad. Will there be abuse? There could be abuse in a situation where people are crazy about grades, and I've had kids that were nervous about bringing home less than an A. I mean, those are rare situations, and the school, can decipher things like that. But children belong to parents. They do not belong to government institutions. And this policy is just a guideline, and everybody has taken it to golden law and whatever. As soon as you Google it, it comes up and pops up as guidelines. So I would like to see this removed, repealed. There are laws, there are safety things in place for children who identify as LGBT or whatever they're identifying as. There are laws to protect them and keep them safe. This policy just hides things from parents. And quite frankly, I'm just shocked at what I'm hearing. I'm not sure how all of you feel. I know you're not going to admit your opinions right here, right now. I guess the town will decide come November what side they want to be on. And it's not a political issue. This is not a political, I'm right and left and somewhere in the middle. This is a parental right. I want my children to grow up and have children where they can be involved in their care, in their school, and everything that goes on in school. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brandon Leventhal. I'm actually from Madawan. Trans youth have a higher rate of homelessness, have a higher rate of depression, and unfortunately have a higher rate of suicide. By rescinding this policy, you'd be making their lives way harder for no good reason. If they don't feel comfortable coming out to their parents, they quite frankly shouldn't have to. You're just putting them in a very tough situation, and if they do have loving parents, good for them. Unfortunately, not every kid has that. And you'd be risking endangering their lives for no good reason, for whatever reason you'd want to rescind this policy. There's no good reason to do it. You'd be putting kids in danger, and quite frankly, you should not rescind this under any circumstance. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Olivia Santasero. I live in Freehold Township, New Jersey. I went to Joseph J. Katina School under the direction of Neil Dickstein, and I went to Eisenhower under the direction of Dr. Brethauer. So it's very nice to see some familiar faces here. I actually had a wonderful experience going through the Freehold Township School District, and I'm so proud to be a product of that district, and it's inspired me to become a teacher myself, which I've been doing for the past 4 years. And I'm very saddened and embarrassed to see that our district is now considering removing policy 5756. Along with a teacher, I'm an ally and an activist for marginalized communities, including the LGBTQ. And just to be very, very clear, this is not a parental rights issue. This is a trans youth rights issue. So just making sure that the lens on this is very, very clear. The people that this is going to affect are trans youth and their families, and they have come forward in many towns. I've been to many board meetings, and they are all in favor of this policy. They are the only ones who this policy is going to affect, and they are all in favor of it. So for what reason would we be rescinding this policy? I truthfully do not know, other than to please parents' rights groups. I'm very confused. Another thing is that, as everyone said, trans youth is very marginalized and at higher risk for depression. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. But essentially, there is no other lens other than looking at this from the lens of trans youth rights. And I, again, am proud to be a product of the Freehold Township School District. I hope that we don't let these smaller political organizations influence us in any way and continue to do what's right for the children, and keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Sign in first, I guess. So my name is Mary Waddell. I have lived in Freehold Township for about just short of 30 years, raised 3 kids at the Katina School and Eisenhower. And I'm going to tell you a little story, a personal story that it's not specifically related to the transgender issue, but Mrs. Breathauer might remember what I'm going to talk about. One of my kids, as she was growing up, she was bullied. She was having bullying issues. I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. Nobody wanted to tell us. I ended up finding out about it after a couple years of us bringing her to a counselor. Thought she needed an antidepressant. We didn't know what was going on. We couldn't figure out what was wrong with this kid. And I'm talking when she was in elementary school. So fast forward, we get a parent came up to me at the bus stop and she said one day, Mary, I don't know if you're aware, but my daughter Erica's coming home very upset about how Jamie's being treated. Sorry, I just said her name. I shouldn't have just done that. But anyway, fast forward, she in share time, one of her teachers called us, and she said, Mrs. Waddell, we're very concerned. We don't know what's going on with Jamie, but we think there's something wrong, and we don't really know what it is. We are concerned, but we would like to come in and meet with you guys, if you could come in and talk with us. So that got this ball rolling where we went and met with them. So thankful to Mrs. Creech for making that phone call, because she didn't know what was going on with Jamie. Yeah, I feel terrible for kids who have depression and anxiety. My daughter has all of that. And when push came to shove, we got that information from the school kind of validating, okay, we're not imagining this. There's something very wrong with our daughter. It's not just mom and dad being overprotective. We were flying blind at that point. When the school contacted us, we said, okay, there is a problem. Something's up. From there, we went to the pediatrician. Fast forward, that was May of 2009. By July, May, we go to the doctor. They say, what's wrong? I have headaches. P.S. How often? Every day. How often? For how long? 4 years. So this kid had been suffering for 4 years. She wasn't the type to complain. 2 months later, she had a 2-day brain surgery, and her life was saved. And I credit Mrs. Creech. And you, Diane, you probably remember, me coming into the school that day, we thought she was literally not coming back to the school. So this was not a specific to the transgender issue, but I am just trying to remind you guys of how important it is that we all work together, you guys, the teachers and the parents. No one's trying to hurt anybody, but when they go home, if a child is struggling with whatever their issue is, whether it's their sexuality, headaches, whatever it is, the schools have them for 8 hours of the day, sometimes more, often more. And when they come home, if they are struggling with any of these issues, by the way, I should mention that my daughter,
Sorry, can you
yes, all right, I'll end it, but
yeah.
I hope you understand what I'm
Yes.
saying. It's
Thank you
just-
very much for your.
Thank you, Ms. Waddell.
Trying to be fair to all
Mary, you're saying
speakers.
parents should be notified.
I'm saying that my daughter was one of those kids, not for that specific issue, but.
Mhm.
Right. And that's.
Hi, everyone. Kim Luxoy, 230 Concord Drive, Freehold, New Jersey. See these index cards? I had all these index cards ready to go. Forget them. With what she just said, I'm going to talk about my own daughter. When she was at Eisenhower School back in the 90s, there were 7 boys that were sexually harassing a group of girls. And they had quite the little thing going on. One boy would put his hand under a chair, and the other boy would push her down, cop a feel, and that was it. The school system didn't call me. The school system didn't have to call me. My daughter told me. Not only did she tell me, all of her friends told me because lucky me, I was the Kool-Aid mom. So we had to have a little discussions about it. What do you do in a situation like this? Or how do you go? My daughter and her friends went into school and solved the problem themselves because they were brave and because they weren't afraid to talk to an adult. I listened to parents here tonight and I don't understand. Why aren't parents talking to their children? That would solve everything. You don't need 5756. Parents should be talking to their children, have dinner with their children, go out with their children, catch a ball with their children, and you'll know what's going on. And that would solve a lot of these problems. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the board? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to Personnel Committee. Ms. O'Sullivan?
We did not meet as a committee this week. So I would like to move number 2, position control, as listed. Number 3, new employment, as listed. Number 4, established start date, as listed. Number 5, salary adjustments, as listed. Number 6, leaves of absence, as listed. 7, railing services, as listed. Number 8, district honoraria resignation, as listed. Number 9, district honoraria, as listed. Number 10, district honoraria update, as listed. Number 11, district honoraria correction, as listed. Number 12, additional compensation, transfer of assignments and room, as listed. Number 13, summer IEP meetings, as listed. And number 14, certified substitutes, as listed.
Okay. Any questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Brand,
Yes.
Mrs. Cozzolino,
Yes.
Mr. Gargiulo,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Sullivan,
Yes.
Mrs. Thoman,
Yes.
Mrs. Vinatoli,
Yes.
Mr. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Amoroso,
Yes.
Mrs. Lambert.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Curriculum and Policy Committee, Ms. Cozzolino.
We did not meet this evening. I'm going to move the action items first. Number 3, as listed. Number 4, the second reading of policies and regulations, as listed. Number 5, student teacher practicum observations and placement, as listed. I'm sorry, my watch is talking to me.
Okay. Okay, so can we have a second on the action items? Any questions on the action items? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, now to the discussion. I think prior to reading the discussion, Prior to the board discussion, Mr. Dickstein couldn't be with us this evening. He's on medical leave. Dr. Brethauer is going to read a statement that he gave for her to read on his behalf.
Good evening. I am disappointed I cannot be here in person, but I am home recovering from surgery. It is important, based upon the conversation that the board is having this evening, to share some thoughts. I moved to central office administration as the assistant superintendent 16 years ago. During that time, sure, sorry about that. During that time, is that better? Yes? Okay. I moved to central office administration as the assistant superintendent 16 years ago. During that time, my responsibilities included school safety in a time when incidents of school violence were increasing, and a new law governing harassment, intimidation, and bullying was being implemented. 6 years ago, when I transitioned to the role of superintendent of schools, my focus upon the safety of each and every student in this district continued to be my primary focus and still is today. It is well documented that students do not learn in an environment in which they do not feel safe. As the superintendent, it is my responsibility to ensure that this is the case for our students. However, this is not accomplished in isolation. Throughout my years in a central office administrative role, I've partnered with communities which included parent representatives to plan and implement a variety of initiatives, policies, and procedures. An environment in which parents are partners, volunteering in schools, and working hand in hand with staff to provide a positive, welcoming environment is one that we strive to foster. It is my belief that parents play an active role in their children's education and contribute to their feeling of comfort and safety in school. As we move forward this school year, I want to assure you that I take my responsibility seriously in providing an environment in which each student feels safe in our care and one in which parents play an active role in supporting that environment. My commitment to ensure our students feel safe and welcome is not contingent on any one policy or regulation, but it is the core of my values and my responsibility as superintendent and will remain so throughout my career as an educator. Thank you.
Thank you. Feel better, Neil. Do you want to address some of the comments? Some of the comments centered around the fact that if this policy were abolished, students in our district would lose certain rights and certain protections. I don't believe that to be the case. I want to ask Dr. Brethauer if she's okay addressing some of the comments. As Mr. Dickstein is not here tonight, I'm not trying to put her on the spot. So if feel free to to punt, and because the 9 of us have to weigh in anyway. So
I think that as an educator, as a mom, I needed to know that there are protections for my daughter in school, and federal and state law do provide those protections. One example would be 5512, the HIV policy, which we report on every month because it is pretty rigid in that if anything comes to our attention at all, where there's a perceived, not actual, perceived indiscretion or something that is upsetting, offensive, discriminatory, it runs the gamut, or just an unkind statement, we are obligated to, 1, tell the parent that we are investigating, 2, run an investigation, and 3, determine a conclusion. And that is for any child, despite your race, your color, your nationality, your sexual identity. It could be perceived. So if someone calls me fat and I perceive myself as an overweight person, that's a hib. And no adult and no child could make that statement without repercussion. So I do think it was well-intentioned when 5756 came. It had good intentions, but I don't think it really did anything, to be truthful. I think we already have some pretty equity policies and procedures in place to embrace all of our children. And I think we do value each and every one of them, and we protect them. And similar to what Miss Wodell just shared, you know, to every single child who walked through the door was one of my kids. When I buried a couple of my kids, I lost my kids. When Jamie had surgery, it's like my kid had surgery. So not for 1 minute, whether that policy is in place or not, will that ever change. Each kid who walks through the door, we look at as our own, and we want to protect, and we want them in a safe environment, and we'll do anything that it takes to do that. So I just wanted to say that, you know, I don't want that perception to be out there, that the kids are fending for themselves, because that's not true.
Okay. Neil?
Am I allowed, Madam President, may I talk? I move to rescind policy 5756. And may I say why? As part of the discussion?
I would like to have a discussion first, because you moving before this board has had a chance to discuss it. I'm only going to move to table it, and then we're back to square one.
All right, we'll do it later.
There. So you could say why you would like to. That's why
Sure.
we're discussing
Sure.
what to do with the policy, which we know has been a thorn in people's sides for several years. So let's just discuss it.
So like Dr. Diane said, prior to 5756, what,
I thought we were having a discussion, not us addressing it.
We are having a discussion with each other.
With each other.
yeah,
Okay, so you're addressing it.
yeah,
Okay.
all right, well, you know, I could look to the left, I look to the center, and look to the right. That's how you do public
I
speaking.
just want to make sure we're clear about why we're doing this.
Yeah,
The intent is.
okay.
Okay.
So Dr. Diane brought up a very good point. What did we do with the policy prior? Were our kids being hurt prior to 5756? I have not read many statistics at all in the last 15, 20 years of teen suicide. I haven't read, and I read all the time. Also, we're dealing with minors. They need their parents. Would we allow the children to say, come into school and say, hey, I want to smoke? We'd go crazy. Or we want to drink. They go crazy. So, the population is very tiny. It's 1%. No one wants trans children to be hurt in any way. I don't. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and I'm positive there were transgender people in my day, okay? And I didn't hear in the neighborhood that so-and-so committed suicide. I didn't. The children are suffering from dysphoria, but it's not only dysphoria. New studies have just come out. They have depression, bipolar disorder, deep depression, schizophrenia. They need counseling and help. Who doesn't want to help them? Okay? But the parents are integral in the process. This policy hides the records of the students. That's very, very wrong. They go in as Jack, leave their parents as Jack, they're in school as Jill. Well, who's outing them? They're in school. The kids are seeing them as Jill. They're calling her Jill. She's now a she. It's going to get back to the parents. No, eventually. So why not bring the parents in? Now, Neil brought up something very good. He said he actually talked to the transgender children and asked them and worked with them, can we tell your parents? And I really respect that. So he was doing it within the confines of 5756. And that's fine. But I'm saying we don't really need it. Studies, they talk about suicide. We talk about all sorts of suicide. And the suicide is after a kid, when they're young at 14 and 15, they have the puberty blockers. Some of them get surgery. And then when they're 18 and 19, they realize, what the heck did I do? And the studies in Sweden have said that that's when the suicide is happening. Read the studies in Sweden. They're coming out. And the same thing UK. UK had a very big transgender policy, but they're modifying it because of research. I'm not done, Jeff.
No, I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
So to your point, you said that Neil would be working with these transgender students. What if that child tells Neil, I don't want you to tell my parents?
It's a problem. It's a problem that the parents are not told. That's the problem.
But if the child themselves...
He's a minor. The child is a minor and is maturing. They don't have the full faculties.
Okay. All right. Jeff, would you like to speak next?
I just had a question for Neil. And
That's
Neil-
fine.
Well, do
I
you want to
answered
weigh
it.
in on how you feel about this policy?
Well, I can't vote to abolish a policy without putting some protections in place. One of my biggest concerns is we notify a parent on Tuesday, to Neil's point again, that the child is having trans thoughts, however you want to frame it, okay? That kid doesn't show up for school Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Then what? Are we sending police officers to that house? Are we doing a wellness check on this child?
Probably.
With any child,
again, if
with
there's
any
no-
child
With
who is
But if
absent,
there's no
without
policy
a
in
cause,
place.
with any child who is absent
And I'd like to
without
ask
a cause.
Jeff a question.
But I would like to give an opportunity for all
Go ahead,
9
Todd.
of us.
Can I just ask this question, please, kindly, Madam President?
Yes.
Okay. There's state and federal laws protecting the trans. They're right here listed in the policy.
Then
So you don't need another policy. And they talk about, everyone talks about, oh, moms for this and a lot of politics. Who helped the state of New Jersey to write this policy? It's Garnet State Equality, which is an activist group.
But actually, in your point, more than once, you said 55, 57, 57, 56 works. You said it works.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, you did. You absolutely
I
did.
didn't say
you
that.
Said,
Because Neil
I don't
interpreted
want
it.
this to be
All right,
We need
okay.
to hear each other.
All
Hear
right.
each other.
I hear him.
Okay.
you asked me to give my point. I gave my point. I'll pass
Okay.
it to Renato or Mario. Whoever else wants to talk.
Okay.
Can you put your mic on?
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I just go through some questions before I even get to how I feel? Because I don't think till I answer the questions, I can truly know.
If they're appropriately supposed to be answered by Neil, they may not be answered tonight.
And that's fine. That's
So
fine.
they may
I
not
just,
be
want-
answered
I
until
just,
the next meeting.
I want us to consider them and I want us to get answers for them.
Okay.
So if I'm going to go through the policy itself and what it says, essentially, not I'm going to read it all, but I'm going to refer to specific sections. Under the definition and terms, it says it is recommended that school personnel discuss with students the terminology and pronouns each student has chosen. Will this still be happening, or is this something that we're barring by getting rid of the policy?
Are we not allowing a pronoun decision? Is that
A
what you're asking?
pronoun discussion with like a teacher and a student.
If the child wants to have a discussion, yes, they are allowed to have a discussion.
So we wouldn't be prohibiting that. Even though this policy protecting that would be gone, that still would not be something that this administration is going to prohibit from taking place.
No.
Okay,
I have a follow-up question.
go ahead.
So, who decides? So, how will we know that that's, and how will our staff know that that's what's supposed to happen? So, say this discussion happens, or even here, some of these other things that are in this policy, right? If we take the policy away, how will we not end up with chaos, and how will we not know clearly what's going to happen? For instance, it says the school district shall accept a student's asserted gender identity. Parental consent is not required. Will we continue to accept a student's asserted gender identity without alerting their parents?
This policy, right, was written, and it was shared with us, just to be clear, that it was mandated. We were told,
Yeah.
and we have broadcasts.
It's
Just being
listed as
clear.
an M.
No, I
So
totally get
we
that.
didn't bamboozle anybody. That's what, right?
It had the required.
It had the required.
Yep.
It came out from the thing, and we did it. Right. So, just to be clear, we are not mandated to or not You know what I mean? Like this policy was basically saying that.
Sure.
We,
This is saying we would not. So my question is, if we remove
Oh, it's
it,
saying we are not
We're not
required
required to.
It doesn't say that we cannot. It
Correct.
doesn't say that we would not.
Correct.
It says we are not required to.
so
There's no
what?
affirmative duty. I think that's
Correct.
Correct.
What? So what would we do? So if a child whose birth name is Jane says that they want to be John and they want to be called him, are we going to tell the parents?
I will tell you that as in each individual is an individual, and each case involving a transgender student is individual to that student. So Neil, if he were here, will tell you he cannot answer that. It's on a case-by-case basis.
That's an answer though. So it will be,
It
if
needs
we
to be
rescind this
analyzed.
policy.
And it was prior to, by the way. Just so you
nothing-
know, we've had plenty of students prior to this policy. Plenty of students who would fall under this criteria.
So just to be clear, so if we rescind this policy, the district would approach each issue, each child on a case-by-case basis. So sometimes we would alert the parents and sometimes we wouldn't.
I can't have
answer
I can't have Dr. Brethauer answer that with Mr. Dickstein not here.
Okay.
This is something you can explore and we should explore as
Yeah.
a board over
a
the
big
next
question.
several weeks, but that's not a fair question for her right now.
And that's fine. Part of this is to have this discussion and start thinking about these things. Then I have a follow-up question to that, and perhaps you can't answer this one either. So we were talking about trans a lot. What is our policy if a kid is LGBTQ and they're not disrupting the school, they're not a behavior issue, but they're just out? Do we make a phone call home and say, hey, Jimmy was holding hands with Dan, thought you should know?
To be honest, in my time as an administrator, I barely had the time to make the calls that I had to make. So me personally, no, I didn't make those calls, nor would I continue to. That's not what the essence of this is about. The essence about a child being allowed to be who he or she is and be comfortable with that was in place prior to 2019 and will remain in place if this policy gets abolished. I just need to be clear. The SOPs to that everybody wants answers to, we obviously haven't had more than 10 seconds today, me, Bob, Becky, Chris Cleffy, to even sit and talk about that. So I'm going to concur with what Michelle said. I'm not going to answer questions about the SOPs of carrying it out. But I can tell you prior to 2019, 13 years of which I spent as the principal of the middle school, this is not our first rodeo.
Mm-hmm.
I need you to know from the bottom of my heart, like your freedom of speech is protected as long as you don't create an unsafe environment for someone. The minute you say you're bringing a bomb into school or there's someone has a weapon, you have lost that right. And these are kids that we're talking about. These are kiddos who are not high school kids. We graduate them at 14 years old. We have to provide a lot of supports from pre-K to 8. And we always have done so.
Now, I'm sorry, I'm not, if we're getting rid of this,
It's a good meeting to be in the hot seat. Bring it on.
Okay.
Keep going.
I'm gonna.
I'm gonna predicate this with understanding that Neil does, and unfortunately,
The
he
problem
can't.
that I have is, did Neil ask you to give him the question?
But he's home.
Okay, questions.
But I'm still developing that you gave this to me today to look at this. No, I didn't.
Carrie?
I had no idea that it was certain.
Well,
I suspected.
We're here to discuss it, but don't put her in the hot seat. It's not fair to her.
Hold on.
You
It's
have
not
the
a hot
questions.
seat. We didn't ask to have this meeting. You called this meeting.
I did call
if
this
we have
meeting.
questions, we are well within our right to ask.
Put your mic on,
And
please.
it's fine that you can't answer them today. That's totally fine. But to act outraged that we have questions about this.
I'm only upset because Neil did ask to have the questions presented to him today, and he could have answered them and given a statement to Diane.
Nobody asked me for
and
questions.
worked with Diane.
Nobody asked me for questions.
He did ask Mary.
Recovering from
He didn't
surgery
ask me
at
about
home. I'm not giving him a list of questions.
Look, and it's not like we don't want to provide, as Michelle said, our practices and our policy adoption in this district require a 2-reading process. It doesn't matter what vote takes place tonight, because it's not over until it's over. We have October 17th, right? So I think what Michelle is saying, let's talk about how we feel about it, right? If there's action taken, please know then we have 3 weeks until October 17th to get you the answers to the questions that you need.
That's totally fine.
Sure. No, and I'm trying to write them down. Go ahead.
Okay. You can choose to answer them or not, or maybe you can't answer them, and that's fine.
You're killing me. Okay.
You're killing me.
Did you type that?
What?
Is that your question that I typed?
No, this is the policy with my notes. The part of this policy also requests that the superintendent or designee should ensure training is provided to school staff members on sensitivity and respect towards transgendered students. Is that going to continue?
Yes.
Can you read that again? Sorry.
That
It-
happens before this policy, though.
The superintendent or designee
From
should
another
ensure
policy.
training
We have
is
another
provided to
It's
school
annual.
staff members on
Right.
sensitivity and respect towards transgendered students.
All
You could
students.
say it
All
happened in the
students.
past,
No,
and
we
it
have a policy on it outside of this policy.
Okay.
That requires it be done annually.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's great. I didn't know that. It's part of why I'm asking these questions. I need to make sure kids
I'm not
are safe.
criticizing you for asking them. I just don't want Diane to feel like she's in the hot seat. It's not fair to her. It isn't.
I don't. I get that everybody here, for the most part, wants to protect these kids.
Absolutely.
The principal or designee should have an open but confidential discussion with student to ascertain the student's preference on matters such as chosen name, chosen pronoun, parental communications. It already requires that. I assume we're not getting rid of that portion.
And typically, it is a student who comes forth.
Of
having
course.
I'm just making it clear. I'm not pounding the pavement, right? Kids come forward. We have confidential conversations. However, however, as with all conversations they have, it's prefaced with, right? Where is this going? What does that mean, right? Case by case. What does this mean, right?
Sure. If you're going to come out like this in school, obviously, like Neil said last time, there's a conversation that takes place that it's likely. Freehold is a small town. I mean, it's a bigger town, but it's a small town.
Kids go home. They
Mom
talk.
and dad
It's
might find out
likely
about it. How are you going to handle that conversation?
One school bus ride home.
Yeah.
Parents are
I mean,
going to start.
truthfully, we're usually the last to know. I mean, if you want to be honest, the kids
Sure.
are, we're all in fantasy land with our phones and social media. We are the last
Yeah.
ones to know.
Then it says the school district may seek a variety of professionals, including counselors, school psychologists, to provide emotional supports for all students who demonstrate a need. And that are we going to continue to provide that support?
We have a very deep well of related services, child study team members, school counselors, social workers, psychologists, and when needed, we bring in outside folks to help us support the need. We also have the YMCA. We also have some psychiatrists that we work with directly. We have for any child in need for any reason. Again, I'm not qualifying it. Yes, that's our job. That's, as Bob said, that's the stuff that's in our budget that's mandated, right? Like that, we're obligated to provide these
Except I'm
supports.
sure, and we've all had presentations on how schools overall could use more access to mental health services.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Never
A school's obligation to ensure non-discrimination on the basis of gender identity requires schools to provide transgender students with equal access to educational programs and activities, even in circumstances in which other students' parents or community members raise objections or concerns.
That is,
We have diversity clubs. Are we keeping them?
yes.
School staff members may not disclose information that may reveal a student's transgender status except as allowed by law. The principal or designee is advised to work with the student to create appropriate confidentiality plan regarding the student's transgender or transitioning status. Will that still be happening?
It's always the
It's
goal.
virtual, right?
It's always the goal is to have the parent in the process. That didn't change and it doesn't change.
So now this is the flip side. So I'm a parent who knows my child is presenting as their true gender, which is different than their gender at birth. I come to this district and I let the school know that Sally used to be Steve, presenting as Sally, completely presenting as Sally. We're going to keep that confidential.
Are you a parent?
Yes. The parent and child are coming to you together in this scenario.
You're enrolled and you're a parent and you're saying
I'm coming into the district. I'm moving in, which sometimes happens quite frequently in these families. And I'm having this conversation with you as an administrator, just to make you aware. You're going to maintain that confidentiality. You're going to keep the records.
Anybody that's used to be Jim.
Yeah. And you're going to keep
honestly,
the
I don't know
records.
why it would be coming to me in the first place because they're enrolled as.
Well, their
you said.
records, their legal name might not match the name that they're presenting to the school in.
Yeah, we can in Genesis put in the preferred name. So whatever you as the parent enroll them as. Yeah. Sure.
What if the child?
Can you just put your mic on, Meg? I'm sorry.
That's fine. What if the child who has a preferred name and the parent disagrees with that? What will actually happen in the school?
No, that's a good question. I guess we have to talk about it. I don't know.
Okay.
Does
Sorry to
anything,
interrupt. I
like,
just-
what do we do now, or we've never encountered that?
Yeah, I mean, to be truthful, it's not really been an issue. I know it's shocking to hear, but for the most part, we're usually the last to know.
Okay.
And it's a lot of times the parents and the kids wanting to make sure that the. Sorry, I'm trying not to scream into the microphone here. I just said that it's usually, honestly, over the years, and I'm only speaking from experience, it's more of a conversation that comes forward and wanting to make sure that, the teachers know and, it's never been I want this, I want that. So I don't know the answer.
Dr. Bertha, I do then have a question then, based off of what Michelle said before, case by case basis. Again, Neil meets with a student, however that works, and that student absolutely tells Neil, you cannot tell my parents. What does Neil do on that case by case basis?
I'm not Neil.
Oh, I understand.
So I
or as an administrator, or
There have been times over the years where students might have shared something not like this, and I said, "I'm sorry, I can't do that." That's me. I don't know if that was the right answer. I'm just saying that I know that I've said sorry. What you just shared with me, I cannot. Like I said, each of these kiddos is one of my kiddos, and at any point, when your mom antennae go up. So no, I err on the side of I can't keep. There are no secrets.
I'm trying to find.
I'd like to make a point that I want this board to consider because I have the utmost respect for you, Dr. Brethauer, and for. Sorry, I have the utmost respect for you, Dr. Brethauer, and also for Mr. Dickstein. And I believe you when you say that they're your kiddos. And I've seen how you've treated my own children, and I appreciate that very much. But, someday you won't be in the seat. Someday you're going to retire. Someday Neil will retire. Or maybe I'm
by the end of the week. I'll still be here. Just kidding.
So I just, these policies that we create, we have to think about, what will be in place when you're not here. And what if we have somebody who feels very different in that place? And they're doing it on a case by case basis. What decisions are they going to make? In the absence of a policy, And I understand, I'm a parent. I'm a parent of 3 kids, one in the district right now. I understand the desire to be informed and engaged. I totally get that. But since when in Freehold Township can't we do both? I don't understand why we want to repeal this policy and not have something that works for everybody in its place.
We do.
Do
May I say something, Dr. Diane?
Yes.
Policy, New Jersey Law Against Discrimination, NJLAD, and you have the Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972. I'm pretty sure most of the questions being asked, most of them are covered under those 2 policies.
Okay, they're not.
Did you read them?
No, but I can bet they are.
I read them and I searched for it and I can't find it. So please, I invite you to look for them.
And I can tell you that they're probably there.
And if you find them, Neil, please show them to me. Because I've spent the better part of today trying to look for them.
Okay, I respect that. But I bet you they're still there.
Not having read it, I would.
Would anybody else like to? Can you just have a mic on? Thank you.
I'd like to just repeat that everyone on this board considers children's best interest at heart. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. We're volunteering our time, our effort, and our good works for this. But I think a policy that's redundant and that tries to hide things from parents is not in the best interest of children. Children need an open, honest discussion with their parents, with their teachers, with their administrators, to be themselves and to be less fearful. If they're afraid to speak to their own parents, it's a medical issue. It's not a policy issue. You can't mandate health. You need to have procedures in place that help children. And I think we have that in our schools. So I don't see this as a policy that needs to be supported when it's being redundant and hurting parents' rights. The government, the schools should be support of the parent. Parents shouldn't be behind the school. The parent comes first towards the child.
Thank you, Renata.
Thank you. Mary, Alana, anybody?
Well, I'll let somebody else go first before I give my opinions.
Sorry, Mike, if my back is to you.
Want to say anything? I can keep going around the room.
Keep on going.
Okay, Mike? Keep going. Hey, Kerry.
I have a question.
Can you put a mic on? Thank you, sorry.
Here, you want this one?
As long as something's on.
Okay. I've been a parent here for 10 years. I'm going to be a parent here for 10 more years. Some of you have lived here 5 minutes, and you think that you can come in and say how we should do things because you don't understand how we have done things. Like Diane and Michelle and Neil Dixon have said, like, kids come first here. Like, when I ran for this board, I didn't run to say I'm going to support you, but I'm not supporting you. I ran because I believe the majority of us have every single student in this district, their safety, their education, everything about them, you know, in the forefront of their minds. You know, I appreciate people coming out, but, you know, like Mike said, do you live here? Do you have kids here? Because I'm hearing from a lot of people that don't live here and don't have kids here. And I'm probably going to regret saying this to you, but I think that I would like to do a roundtable with our parents and our community and get feedback from them.
I agree. I agree. 100%.
I mean, we should, as a board, we have always only considered all policy after hearing parent input, and so we should have roundtables. We should hear from all the parents.
Yes.
The same way they should hear from all of us what we're thinking, why we're thinking it. Parents, you know, you can't educate yourself unless you hear all sides from all people. So, and that includes parents.
I agree.
So, I would agree with that.
So I would like to say that I would like to set that up. I mean, I can work with Bob, or not Bob, Neil and Diane, sorry, Bob, you're in my line of sight, to arrange those, because I think it's very important to hear from the parents and I mean, our students are young. We're not a high school district, but anybody who is, Mary, give me the word I'm looking for.
Connected.
Not connected, like,
Has experience with our district?
no. Anyone this is gonna affect.
Yeah.
Impact. Thank you. Sorry. I think, for somebody like me who I don't agree. I don't believe your religion belongs on this board. I don't believe your politics belong on this board. I don't believe that you should be here for any other reason than to support every single child in this district, regardless of what color they are, what gender they are, what sexuality they are. They're neurodiverse, they're neurotypical. Like, that for me is the biggest thing. And I don't believe that our administration or would ever do anything. Like, I trust Neil, I trust Diane to do what is right on a case-by-case basis, or like looking at students. I trust them to do what is right, policy or no policy. So I just want it known that how we do things here, that's not how they do things other places. And I think we get thrown into the mix a lot of times with all these surrounding districts. Well, this happens here and this happens here. We're Freehold. We don't do it other ways. And I think that how we've been doing it, and if the policy were to go away, I trust Neil and Diane and Becky and Chris and Bob and everybody in this district to do, and our principals to do what is right. That's all I had to say. And I will set up the round tables.
And those they are usually virtual?
No, they're going to be in person.
They're going to be in person?
They do, we usually do both.
Right.
I think we should just do one in person.
It might be hard.
It might be hard
to get a
The virtual
building.
is very hard.
It might be hard to get a building, but,
Well, I'll
so,
see.
okay,
I'll call Kelly tomorrow.
okay.
Yeah,
So,
just to be clear, we have 5, 10, 13 days, business days before the next meeting, so.
okay.
And I'm going to add to that, because I'm going to say that one of the things I got stuck with today, listen, nobody has all the answers here. Nobody wants to hurt kids. Like, that's what it comes down to. Nobody wants to step in between a parent and their child either. It's a difficult issue. But one of the things in our ethics is that we are only going to take action after careful and thoughtful appraisal. So I think we owe it to our community to do that.
Of course.
Whether we like what we hear or we don't. Yeah.
That's why we do 2 readings. So, that's a given. Whether, whether we do 1 reading tonight, the first reading is next meeting, I don't really care. I will defer to the majority of the board. But we have to have this discussion, because we need to know where we kind of stand in terms of moving this forward or not. If I was sitting here with 9 people saying this is ludicrous, we would never abolish this. We wouldn't even have a round table. But let's call a spade a spade. We are 9 people with 9 very diverse ways of thinking and why we think the way we think. So it's only fair to one another that we be honest with each other so we know what we're dealing with.
And can I just clarify or ask a question about last meeting, and who can remember what Neil said? But I thought Neil said that with this policy, he never kept parents out. Like, from what he said of the limited number of kids that were impacted, those discussions, most of those kids had already told their parents. And those
He worked with them to.
He worked with them.
And then he worked with the remaining to actually have those conversations with their parents, which is, I think, if I read this policy correctly, what it says to do.
Well, so this is the problem with this policy. We could read it one way. Other people are reading it, and Neil will tell you this if he were here. There are other districts, there are even board attorneys advising other districts that what that policy says is you cannot tell the parents at all. Right. So the state basically, NJSA, I think it's 18A3641, basically says that the Department of Education should issue guidelines to the schools to protect the rights of these students.
Yeah.
And in issuing these guidelines, the state put in all this other language. Now, I guess at this point, I'll speak for myself. I would always go last out of deference. So if anyone else wants to speak first, go ahead. Anybody? No? Mike? Elena? Okay.
Having listened to what everybody has said and being a parent and an educator, you do have many different types of students that come across your path. And you really have to take each case as an individual case. And sometimes you can't or shouldn't tell a parent. And then sometimes you need to tell a parent. Even if the child says, please don't tell my parents, because I've had that a gazillion times. But you have to, all right? So based on whatever the situation is, when you know that a kid, once you make that phone call, as soon as that kid gets home, is going to get beaten with that strap, that's when the decisions have to maybe take a turn. You have both sides. What we have to do, and I won't say, oh, that'll never happen here in Freehold. That only happens in the city. No. But you have to be able to take each individual child, each individual case, each individual set of parents, and say, okay, these are all facts. This is how we're going to have to proceed. And sometimes it's going to be calling a parent. Sometimes it's going to be calling an agency for extra help. Sometimes it's not going to be calling the parent. It all depends on the case. And that's how we have to look at this.
But Anna, how, and this is maybe a question for those of you who have more experience as administrators.
But absent a policy, how is a teacher going to make that decision?
Teachers make those decisions
I have
almost every day.
I know that they're mandatory reporters.
You know, as a mandatory reporter.
Right,
There you go.
mandatory
Teachers, principals, they are on the hot seat every day. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. And they have to make those decisions based on the facts that are presented to them at that particular time.
But without any policy or guidelines to fall upon or standard operating procedure, I just feel like we're leaving them out there.
I don't agree.
No?
I think they're already there.
Dr. Breather, how many hours a day do you spend consulting with your colleagues about all different kinds of issues where they're asking for your guidance because the teachers come to them with an issue?
That's why I have a job. I mean, that's essentially what I do is act in consultation of. So I'm going to concur with what Elena said. The minute-by-minute decision-making is happening in the classrooms. It's happening in the buildings. It is a fast and furious. That's why I didn't mean to minimize your question before, Mary, but truly, any principals who are here tonight, any teachers who are here, anyone who's listening, they're taking time away from their plans, their grading, they're responding to parents. They're not taking time away from watching TV. That's not happening, right? It is a all day, all night, all consuming job. I don't believe we're negatively impacting kids. Like I said, had I not lived, breathed, and walked in these hallways myself prior to this policy, it's what we did. I brought in consultants to work with my staff, right, to build empathy, to say, how do we work with kids who are different? And it could be, right, neurodiverse, it could be my ERI kids, it could be my kids who are trans. Honestly, for the 805 kids I had, there were 805 little people sitting in front of me with 805 different things going on at home and 805 different parent structures. And right there, I mean, it is monumental what we're asking educators to do. And I just need to be clear, and I know this is a volatile, hot topic, but prior to this policy, we did right by kids and that will not change. Period. You guys are the ones who hire the superintendent, and the superintendent hires all of us. And in the image of what we want, right? We task the superintendent, go forth and bring these people who have these values and bring them here. And that's what we do. Right?
It's different here. We're just a different.
I don't know that it's very different. I think it's just what we know. I think that truly, I think every town in New Jersey is having the same conversation. I know what we do here.
Yes, what we do here, how we handle situations, we are not going by what you see. We're not a cookie cutter place. We're not somebody that says we're going to do this across the board for every single student. We don't do that from an academic standpoint. I don't think we do it from a special education standpoint. I don't think we do it from a mental health standpoint.
I mean, ask Bob, how many times as a principal, and even now, do I go, so I got this question today. What do you think about that? Every day, right? A parent was asking, or a stepmom was at, right? And she wanted, and Genesis and school messenger, and how do we, maybe we should be sending to 10 different emails, right? We're uncovering this as we go, right? And so unless someone and a parent comes forward and says, hey, I have a question, how can you better meet the needs of my family? And then we say, how can we do it, right? How can we do that? Because our goal is to be inclusive.
But Diane, what happens to the kid sitting in a junior high classroom right now who's thinking, I have nobody to talk to? I think I might be able to talk to this teacher.
An adult, which is what
we encourage.
Every kid has at least one trusted adult.
If I know
at least one,
that what I tell that trusted adult is not in that circle of trust.
What do you mean it's not in that circle of trust?
So if I know, if I tell you, I really like you, Mrs. Dr. Brethauer, I think I can tell you this. This is how I'm feeling. My parents are not in favor of this. I'm not saying my dad's going to beat me up. My mom's going to.
You're saying there's a tough conversation ahead, and I need your help. Most times kids are coming to us, most times staff are coming to us and saying, I got a lot going on in my life. And I need help. Can you help me? That's what we do in HR.
But are you picking up the phone or are you counseling that kid like you would now, that this is a conversation you do need to have with mom and dad?
Me personally, yes. And 9 times out of 10, you're talking to administrators and counselors who teachers, particularly elementary, who have these kiddos for 6 years. The families are woven into the fabric.
I know,
Middle school,
that's
we get
why many of
shortchanged.
us are
We have them
sitting
for
on
3
this
years.
board.
Right, they're fast and furious. But these are not strangers. We make like these are just kids coming in off the street saying, hey, I have something to share.
No.
These are our babies. Right, we're having conversations and transition meetings. It's what we do. I don't mean to get passionate about it, but my Lord, this is what we do. This is our life. So, I take offense when people say this policy goes away and we're just going to trample all over kids.
Well, I didn't say that. That's why
Absolutely
I'm
not the case
asking
at
the
all.
questions.
I
That's why I'm
think-
asking the questions.
No, I don't think she was saying you were saying.
Not you,
I
not you.
think-
I'm just
Mike,
saying.
do you
Okay.
want to? Okay, go ahead.
I've listened to everything.
I
don't want to take time.
Sorry.
I've listened intently to my fellow colleagues on the board. I respect everyone's opinion on this board. I know we're all over the map on this. I've also spoken, like I did when the mask issue came up, to professionals. I spoke to pediatricians. I spoke to counselors. I tried to do my homework. I tried to speak to as many people as I could about this topic. I think one of the things that's tough about it is, and Michelle, you're a lawyer, you know how there's a thing called settled law. You don't kill someone, that's settled law, right? This is unsettled law, right, Michelle?
Very unsettled.
It's unsettled because these are kind of untested waters. They're murky. There's nothing really clear about what comes out of this policy. To answer one of the positions of someone that came to the podium, they said, what's the harm in this? Well, there is a harm in the fact that it sets a precedent when you take away a parent's right to talk to their child about an issue or be involved in a conversation. And to go back to Diane's point, maybe we're spoiled in our district because we have a district where we so trust our administrators and our teachers and our counselors that
we like to leave that open door so that, to Elena's point, where there are cases where there might be a danger at home, it's just automatic. We would just know that the right steps are being taken to protect that child. And I respect the opinions of the people that feel like, hey, we don't want any child to be harmed. Why take this away? I think the reason is that we do have the laws in place to protect the children. We do it now. Whether this policy is there or not isn't going to affect the services we provide to our children. So for me, it's harmful to think that we have a government that can create laws, and then those laws can get into the schools, and then you send your child to that school, and then there could be a secret or something that the child isn't allowed to take home to the parent. That, and I'm not just talking about this issue. Tomorrow it could be another issue. It could be any issue that might come up in the future. I think it's a dangerous road to go down. I don't think you need to codify, you should not tell parent X, Y, Z. You can't code that. But if it sets a precedent, Mary, that this could just open Pandora's box to the future. What next could we do to hide from a parent? And I don't think it's necessary, because whether it's there or not, I don't feel like any child is being harmed, because, like I said, the services we provide now are so professional and follow state law that it's an unnecessary, I think it's just an unnecessary policy to put in place that's causing everybody to get into a big fight over nothing, because the protections are already there. And I think this is an issue that's just dividing us, and it shouldn't, because everyone here on the board loves and respects children, and we know our teachers and our administrators do, and we have to work together on a case-by-case basis. And I think that's the best way to move forward. Let's not try to make so many restrictive laws that our hands are tied and we can't even make decisions because we're so afraid to talk or move. We can't function like that. We have to entrust that when we seat people into these positions, they're going to make professional decisions for the best interest of the children, and try not to make the laws so restrictive. That's my position on it. So I kind of favor abolishing rather than amending, because I feel like getting rid of it gets rid of a big problem, and it leaves the right decisions to be made by the right people that we put in place.
Right.
That's my opinion.
Okay, so I guess,
I agree with what Mike said. He was on point with that. I think that we have great teachers and administrators, and I think they can handle most every problem that comes up, period. Now, there may be an error occasionally, but we're all human. I would like to draw everyone's attention to the policy itself. It says the school district shall accept the student's asserted gender identity. Parental consent is not required. A student need not meet any threshold diagnostic or treatment requirements to have his or her gender identity recognized and respected by the school district, school, or school staff members. So in other words, there's no counselor talking to the student and working through him. He just comes in one day and she's I'm a she. And we have to accept it according to what this says. In addition, a legal or court-ordered name change is not required. There is no affirmative duty for any school district staff member to notify a student's parent of the student's gender identity or expression. So it's very clear what they're saying here. The parent is left out. It's not right. You can't get between, the state shouldn't get between the parent and the kid.
And my question is going to be, are we going to still abide by that? That if a kid, and I think you might have asked it, Meg, what are we going to do if a kid says, I am a he? How are we going to handle that as a district if mom and dad are opposed to that?
And that we're going to have to come up with, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to be black and white, it'll be a case by case. But we don't need, we don't need, we don't need a court order you don't need that. That is true.
Yeah.
So that's not going to change.
Okay.
Yeah.
do you have a question?
Well, we're not address me and next meeting. We're
doing it now. So if we're doing it now under the policy, why are we going to abolish a policy that we're following anyway?
Because it stops the parents from being part of the conversation.
Right.
The sole issue is parental notification.
That's a big issue.
That is honestly why we're here. It's why it's a hot topic throughout the state. I have heard from our public, I've heard from all of you. I've spoken to many of you in the past, so many of you already know where I stand on this. I think I come from this from a different angle, and I don't know if it's my legal background or not. I believe in equal protection under the law for everybody, regardless of who you are, how you identify, and everything else. I believe in no discrimination whatsoever, but I also believe in those things not at the expense of discriminating against somebody else. And I do personally feel and have always felt that some of the policies and laws that we have infringe on what I believe is a fundamental constitutional right to parent your children in the way that you see fit. There's a long-standing string of Supreme Court federal cases, and balancing what I believe to be a fundamental parent right against keeping a child safe and supported and non-discriminated against in our schools is no easy feat. So I'm not going to criticize the policy for what it is, because I think the intent behind it was to protect children. The practice of it, though, is creating chaos and infringing on other people's constitutional rights, which I don't agree with. As I sit in this seat, I feel like I take an oath as a board member to uphold the laws of the state and of the United States Constitution. I took an oath as an attorney to uphold the Constitution, and my reading of our Constitution and our Supreme Court cases supporting it support a certain level of parental rights. It has nothing to do with my religion or my beliefs. I'm not aligned with any political party. In terms or any extreme group. I'm not doing this at the request of any of these groups. In fact, if you spoke to some of them, they'll probably tell you that they hate me for one reason or another. I'm here as an individual who stays true to what I believe in and my reading of the law. So my feeling is this policy has gone too far and leaves too much ambiguity, and it leaves school districts open, in my opinion, to litigation. The flip side of that is, while I do have extreme trust and faith in our administration, they could get hit by the bus tomorrow. So without, certain, no offense, Diana.
Driving the bus.
So I understand concern. I've been in this town for 32 years, and I see how this district has done things for 32 years, and it's been consistent that whole time. But you never know. So I think that all of it deserves careful consideration in terms of what this should look like, how this should. My opinion is that any amendment to this policy is going to invite an NJLAD backlash, but abolition of the policy and acting in a way that conforms with our U.S. Constitution and our state laws provides you a little bit more protection from any type of litigation. That's my personal opinion.
Do you think, Michelle, the way it's been implemented here, as Neil described it, and obviously we don't know fully how everything works, do you think that it was ambiguous here? Like, do you think that we had a problem as a district with our individual, because we're talking about our policy, right? I understand it was a statewide policy that was pushed down by Strauss Esme, but do you think we had an issue with the ambiguity? I get it, in different places it could have been.
No, I'll tell you why. Because I don't think that this district operated in a way that it operated to the letter of the law of the policy. This district did what this district always does, which weighs the best interest of the child with all the laws that they operate under. They typically do things by the law, by the book. If a child came to any administrator in this district and said, I want to come out to my parents, however, the few times I raised this, my father beat me 7 ways to Sunday, I have faith that that staff member's not going, that father's not going to be the first person that staff member's calling. That begs a different and a bigger conversation. The flip side of that is, if you have a student who comes, and I'm Catholic, who says, hey, I can't go home and tell my parents this, I'm Catholic, it's against my religion, and that staff member says, okay, I think that puts the child in harm's way, and that child in turn maybe does something to hurt themselves in the future, and those parents find out that the school knew what was going on with the student, I think you invite a lawsuit that way too. I don't think that helps anybody. So the problem with a case-by-case basis is that you're open to a lot of subjectivity. So my personal goal is to stand by our federal laws, our federal case law, our federal constitution, work with what the state has given us, but provide something that removes the ambiguity, because if there weren't ambiguity with this policy, we wouldn't be here right now. We have it, and which is why we're here. If you have ambiguity, you open the door. If you open the door, you open it to extremist groups who will use it to maybe get things they want for not the same reasons you want them as well. And I don't go for that either. So I had this conversation months ago, even with Jeff. I am not a fan because I don't stand by the constitutionality of not telling the parents. And I'm not saying there's situations where a parent shouldn't be told. Of course, a child who's in danger of harm should always be protected. But parents have rights in this country, and until they legislate or decide otherwise, we can't ignore them. And that's where I'm at with that.
I don't think anybody here is against parents' rights. I think we're all parents, right? We're all parents here.
Right.
So, but you were talking about ambiguity. The policy, and at least the way the state is interpreting it, takes away that ambiguity. And I think what we're arguing for is actually more ambiguity. We're trying to get to a place where we can evaluate it on a case-by-case basis using the professional backgrounds that you have. So if there is a child you talked about who's going to say, if you tell my parents, they're going to beat me, I forget the phrase you used, 6 ways to Sunday. 7 ways to Sunday, thank you. We won't tell the parents, right? Or are you in favor of always telling the parent? I'm just trying to make
I'm
sure
just
I'm
saying
clear.
that there's a conversation that needs to take place. And while the actual language of the policy says parental notification is not required, Mr. Dickstein, if he were here, would tell you direction from the state tells him it's mandatory that he doesn't notify a parent. So that in and of itself,
but we don't want to make it mandatory that we always do because of the examples of the nurse who was here earlier speaking about that case.
Correct. If you want to amend a policy and say parental notification is absolutely required, that's a different conversation. Right. That's a different conversation. We're talking about abolishing this policy that gives the school district, who's getting guidance from the state, in saying that parents shouldn't be notified.
So if we abolish this policy, we don't have to listen to what the state is saying? I don't understand how that works.
Until the state legislates otherwise, no, we do not. We make our own rules.
So even currently, we don't have to.
Okay.
So even currently, we don't have to? Like if we
Unless
have this
this
policy.
Without this policy, we have to follow all the other rules which say that there can be no acts of discrimination. There has to be a safe, the statute says that students have to be nurtured in a safe and supportive school environment. So you have to have certain protocols in place that provide what we are statutorily required to provide, which we've already been providing. But like I said, I do live my life by the get hit by the bus theory. You should always plan for the future, as much as I love you all.
Excuse me,
That's
Michelle?
my biggest concern. If Dr. Brethauer wasn't here and Mrs. Montgomery wasn't here and Mr. Dickstein wasn't here, would we have a different culture in the school? Would it not operate that way? And that's
I'm not sure. I have faith that the answer to that is no, only because for 30 years and 7 superintendents, it was always operated that way. So you would have faith, but you never do know. I'm not going to say never. I don't know.
Michelle, can I make a statement in support of Mike's statement before, that this policy is more geared towards a precedent that would tie parents' hands. It's rather than open for protection of the children, it's really, in my view, more of a hindrance as a protection for the parents.
Because it says no affirmative responsibility on
It's
the school.
Yeah, it's a first step. And then there could be other steps that support that and expand on that. It's best to leave parents to children with our care. We have counselors, we have other policies in place that protect children of all kinds. We're all here to help them nurture them, to help them grow, and to help them be the best student or best citizen that they can be. We're not here to hinder a child. This policy is, in my view, I see it as a hindrance of a parent, because all the other angles of the policy are covered by federal, state, and local laws.
Except for all these questions we were asking tonight that we haven't been.
But they've been addressing them over the years.
It really comes down to parental notification.
That's what, I agree.
That's really what, I mean, honestly, that's really what I think.
Well, and just so I'm reading the policy correctly, all the policy says on parental notification is that there's no affirmative responsibility on the school to disclose it. It doesn't say schools can't disclose it. The policy wording itself says there's no affirmative responsibility, which it sounds to me like when we talk about a case-by-case basis, we're kind of adopting that philosophy.
Well, we have been, I would say, but not every other place has, and not every other superintendent would. And either a policy is sort of legal on its face or not legal. I don't know. Like, I think I look at things a little differently in that regard, and I should just remove myself from that conversation. But right, I don't understand, even in all these discussions, like, why isn't anybody analyzing the Supreme Court cases on parental rights? Who in the state of New Jersey is doing this? I don't know.
The case out of Pennsylvania where the police officer who threatened to out the kid was personally found liable.
Right.
And that's an appellate court decision that is in our jurisdiction.
But that can get brought to the Supreme Court.
But until it does, it's standing law in this area.
Yeah.
No, I'm waiting.
Oh, it's okay.
I don't want to interrupt.
Oh, okay.
So a quick question. I know so the two got to go hand in hand. If we vote to abolish, or anyone votes to abolish the policy, does the other side of that, and maybe Neil or Renata, since they're the ones that made a motion and seconded it, is now it's absolute? Is that part of the end game here? Is absolute every single case we're going to notify the parents?
It's a case by case.
The answer is that we don't know. The whole purpose of this meeting was to start the discussion, alert the community, let all the stakeholders hear what this is all about, why we're having this discussion, because we have different reasons for having it. My reason clearly is different than everybody else's reason. And maybe hold some roundtables. Let Mr. Dickstein answer a lot of your questions. He is our superintendent. We could have put this meeting off until next month, but it's better to start these discussions well in advance so everybody has a chance to be heard. Emails, parents maybe viewing in, maybe other parents aren't. They'll hear about it tomorrow. They'll want to email. Our own administrators should weigh in. This affects everybody, and not just us.
So then, Michelle, do you need a motion that we table a vote until roundtables are happening and further discussion? Like, how does that work? Like, where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here? Any person can make a motion to put this on as a first reading to abolish. Any person can second that. If we don't feel that it's the right time, I can put a motion on next meeting to abolish. I can put it on for a second reading next meeting.
Motion still on the table.
Michelle,
I motion
I
to
would-
table it.
Michelle, you had said that when it was done,
Mhm.
right, I would have a chance to put the motion in. You said that.
Yep.
So I would like to put in the motion I would like to move to abolish 5756.
Second the motion.
I'm gonna make a motion to table that. Second.
You need 2/3 vote on that, though, to table it, I believe.
No, majority.
Majority vote to table it. And I'm not opposed to tabling it. I am in favor of abolishing it, but I'm not opposed to tabling it because people do need the opportunity to weigh in. It's the fair thing to do. So,
Weigh in on what? We've been weighing in on it and discussing it. Everyone knows the
Not
policy.
just us, Neil.
not
That-
the community,
The community.
the community.
The roundtable idea, which was a great idea by Kerry.
So there's a motion
So
and
there's,
a table.
there's two motions and there's the motion to table. So do the motion to table first.
It has to.
You gotta look it up.
You gotta-
I've never had this.
You can look it up, but you gotta have a vote on the motion to table first.
I don't want to, because yeah, we have Robert's rules right here. What is,
I think we have.
it's time.
Yeah, we have two motions and, I mean.
Sorry, Diane, I owe you a container.
No. It's all good.
Oh, yeah.
This doesn't mean like order of.
It is the order.
I'll be up all night.
It's the table.
What?
Tables at the bottom. It's just quick reference, got them. And the debate and closed discussions. You want to take a recess for 5 minutes?
Yeah.
5 minute breath and break.
We're going to take a 5-minute recess while we figure out Robert's Rules of Order.
It's not Bob. It's not Bob's order. Caramels, if anybody wants. Cookies.
We're not, we're done. Are we done?
I'm all off the screen.
Okay, we're returning from recess. Before we begin, I was informed by our technology department that our batteries are running low. So, for those of you at home, if the video cuts out, you should still be able to hear audio, right? Correct? It's only the video battery that's running low? Okay. So, if you are at home, you can still listen once the video cuts out, but hopefully we can finish the rest of the meeting without the video cutting out. So, what? We have
we
to
didn't
do
do
what?
finance.
Yes, I know, but we have to finish our motions.
All right. So, and I just confirm, it's the main motion, which would be the motion that Mr. Gargiulo made and then Ms. Brand seconded. That is in the pecking order, the lowest of the pecking order. So the motion to table is higher than that. Motion to amend to table would would come before the main motion, which is to abolish at this point in time.
I thought with Robert's rules, once I move and it's seconded, it has to be discussed and decided on and voted on.
No, once you can make a motion on top of that.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So were you the first on
I
that?
was the first.
To table, and Mrs. Thurman was the second.
Do you need a roll call?
We will take a roll call.
Okay.
So,
We'll call the table.
Yep.
Roll call to table.
Mrs. Brand,
No.
Mrs. Cosolino,
Yes.
Mr. Gargiulo,
No,
Mrs. O'Sullivan,
Yes.
Mrs. Thurman,
Yes.
Mrs. Van Natoli,
Yes.
Mr. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Amoroso,
Yes.
Mrs. Lambert.
Yes.
Motion the table carries.
So now over the course of the next 3 weeks prior to our next meeting, we're going to host a round
I've
table.
already sent Kelly an email asking her for dates and availability of music on building. So
Okay.
as soon as I know in the morning, I'll let you know.
Okay. Okay. And then we hopefully will hear from our community in that time. Okay. With that, moving on to finance, facilities, and transportation, Ms. Vendatoli.
The Finance, Facilities, and Transportation Committee did meet this evening. In attendance were Mr. DeVita, Mrs. Brand, Mrs. Lambert, and myself. We got a lot of items that we had to discuss. There was a transportation issue. The committee reviewed a transportation request from a parent, and Mr. DeVita will respond tomorrow with our decision. Construction update, the committee discussed the ongoing HVAC project. We are still waiting for Train to deliver a number of backnet cards for us to be able to tie the units into our controls. We're also waiting for some parts to come in to tie a new unit at Applegate into the fire alarm panel. Other facility needs, we declared an emergency at Erickson. The heat exchanger for the unit above the media center needs to be replaced. The cost is $40,000 for the part alone. We'll have portable units in the space until we can have the parts fabricated and installed. Demographic study. We engaged with a company last year to create a demographic study for the district due to all the proposed housing. We anticipate the final report by January. Facility staff and studies. We are in the process of evaluating our staffing needs for grounds. A third-party company is going to provide us some detail of our true needs for labor and equipment versus what we currently have. We will use this for the upcoming budget. We are looking to do the same for our custodial staff. As Bob mentioned earlier in his facilities update, the ROD grant, we received $1.4 million. This money will be applied to the next HVAC project for units at Applegate and Erickson. State aid, we received an additional $200,000 in state aid for student mental health. And then we reviewed the agenda items.
Can I ask a question on facilities? We had an issue over at Katina with one of the child study rooms and the controls on there. Was that fixed?
I'm not aware of what the.
I think that it's a room without windows, and one of the switches or the controls wasn't working in that room, and they couldn't even use a portable unit because there's no windows.
I'll have to follow up. I've got probably 50 portable units.
I thought you said something about it last meeting.
So what was happening was, and we have the majority, but not all the backnet cards over at Katina, and so some staff members are feeling, and I don't know if this is the case in this room, that the units aren't working at all when the set point for air conditioning is 75. So anytime the BACnet card is not included and it has not been installed, the factory set point for air conditioning is 75 and the factory set point for heating is 71. So I've had a number of staff members in other buildings that have the same issue say to me, it's not working. No, it's working. It's not working at the temperature you might like it to work right now. So I'll have to follow up. I am unaware of each and every single thing that's going on. We've got a number of things. That one doesn't ring a bell, so I'll find out.
Okay, so, but it's not like all of them have been installed at this point?
No, the majority, as I said, for JJC have been, but they're still, I'm not going to hold my breath. I've had 5 different dates now since the middle of July. We're supposed to get another shipment come in the end of this week, but again, it's every date has come and gone, and my understanding is these are the same type of chips that are used in automobiles or used in everything, and there's still a shortage of them. So, and I don't know how Trane, who's the manufacturer, how they're deciding who gets what. I know our contractor has had numerous conversations. The architect has as well. They're trying to push them, but I'm not sure where we are in the pecking order for a national company who gets what. But hopefully by Friday we'll have some more. Then we just then have to wait for Trane to come back out, install them, test it, and then have the control company hook that unit back up to the control system downstairs. Okay, I'll find out though. I don't recall Mr. Shaw asking me about that room. So
I think when I was there, they were working in other spaces.
Okay.
They moved them. Yeah. I think it was BACnet related, and they were moved. So.
Okay.
Yep.
We're going to go over the agenda items now.
Okay. I'd like to move the agenda items. The number 2, the secretary and treasurer's report as listed. Number 3, bills and claims. I'd like to thank Mrs. Cozzolino for doing the bills this week.
Oh, no,
okay, Tracy's going to harass you.
First thing tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Total bills, $2,009,379.15. Payroll, $2,524,863.51, for a grand total of $4,534,242.66. Number 4, travel and related expenses as listed. Oops, sorry, was that me?
No, I think that was me.
Number 5, transfers as listed. Number 6, disposal as listed. Number 7, disposal of surplus property for Gov Deals as listed. Number 8, school bus emergency evacuation and safety drill report as listed. Number 9, honoraria at Erickson Elementary School. Thank you to the Erickson PTO as listed. And that's all.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Can I have a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Maybe pass one down. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, moving on to old business, new business. I think we've had plenty of business going on tonight, so I will move right into public participation. If anyone wishes to address the board on any item, please step to the podium, state your name and town for the record, write your name and address on the sign-in sheet. Statement should be limited to 3 minutes and shouldn't be abusive, obscene, or defamatory in nature. Would anybody like to address the board on any item? Seeing none, I'd like to thank those of you that stayed with us to the end for coming and participating, especially in light of the discussion that occurred tonight. We look forward to hearing more from all of you. I hope all of you heard all of us. We certainly heard all of you. And I thank you for your time and your comments. With that said, I'd like a motion to adjourn.
Motion, I'll move. Well, first, Hartman games are Friday night at Opetut, God willingly.
Okay.
The weather, who knows?
That's right, September 29th at Opetut, the Hartman soccer game between Bucklow and Eisenhower.
Yep.
So we have a motion to adjourn? A second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Aye.
All right.